Hi, I'm Douglas Ravinsky, and I'm here to show you a bit from my PhD about how much the thylacine weighed and what that can tell us about it. And we only have 8 minutes, so hold on to your butts. For those that don't know, the thylacine was the largest marsupial predator to live to modern times. A distant relative of the numbat and quolls, it lived throughout Australia and New Guinea until a bit over 3,000 years ago, after which it was restricted to the island of Tasmania. By 1840, a bounty had been placed on them because the European colonists were afraid they'd eat their sheep, and within 100 years, they were extinct. This rapid extermination means that we don't have much in the way of basic biological information, such as body mass. We don't even know how much the thylacine weighed on average. Now, why is knowing the mass of the thylacine important to us? It turns out that if you take a predator's body mass and plot it against their prey's body mass, an interesting thing happens. You get this weird inflection point here at 21 kilos of predator body mass. To help orient ourselves here, let's label a couple of points. Uh, there's a wolf and a coyote. All right. Now, analyzing this, researchers found that this 21 kilogram line marks an energetics threshold, where below that mass, most predators take prey less than 45% of their own body mass on average. Above 21 kilos, they almost all take prey larger than 45% of their own mass, sometimes pretty close to or even bigger than their own body size. Think of things like wolves, jaguars, lions, tigers. You get the picture. They called this the costs of carnivory, this energetics threshold here. Now, where does that leave us with the thylacine? The most commonly cited average mass for the thylacine is 29.5 kilograms, above that 21 kilo threshold. This comes from Paddle's 2000 book, and this weight is about the size of a small wolf, or two average sized coyotes, or three Tasmanian devils in a trench coat carrying a house cat. Way back in 2016, I started my PhD and I went to the Smithsonian in the United States and opened up a box and I saw my first thylacine skull. And I immediately said to myself, that's not a 30-kilo animal. It's just too small. Looking back at that paddle value of 29.5 kilos, it became clear that it was based on this range given in the Victorian Intercolonial Exhibition pamphlet. The problem is, looking back at the actual source for that, it really reads as though it's not a weight range at all, but a top end to their size, that they can sometimes reach 60 to 70 pounds, not that they average 60 to 70 pounds. So again, we're just left with no real understanding of the size of the thylacine. So what we had to do then is figure out, how do we weigh an extinct animal? The most common method of doing this is by using dental metric regressions. And with marsupials, that means Myers dental regressions, right? The problem is, these were generated using Paddle's 29.5 kilo value for the thylacine. So this is no good. I had to figure out a way to get an accurate mass from these animals. So I went about getting some thylacines. I enlisted the help of Ben Myers at Thing Lab, and we visited Museums Victoria and the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery, where we used the Artec 3D Leo surface scanner to scan whole mounted skeletons and taxidermies. My supervisors were able to gain access to and scan the only whole body thylacine in the world at the Swedish Museum of Natural History. Using these scans, my colleague Demir Martin digitally sculpted volumetric models around the skeletons. So we have taxidermy mounts, we've got mounted skeletons, and we have volumetric models to weigh. With all of this, we're able to weigh the thylacines with multiple methods. So with the skeletons, we could measure the circumference of their limbs. We could generate convex hulls around those skeletons. We could generate lifelike models, and we could weigh each of these things. And then we could compare those with the values that we're getting from the taxidermies of the actual taxidermied specimens. And we could compare all of that with the traditional dental metrics. So, how does it all stack up? Well, we found that the dental estimates are all higher than the volumetric methods. And these volumetric methods agree really well with the limb-based estimates. And since we have a lot more limb bones in collections than whole bodies and taxidermies, we took these limb value estimates as an accurate mass. And by regressing those masses against the associated crania that we had for those, we could then build a corrected set of craniodental regressions, which is important because most specimens in museums and most paleo specimens, we're talking about heads, right? So this allowed us to weigh 93 individual thylacines. So what did we get from that? Well, it turns out that the average thylacine was somewhere around 17 kilos, not 29 and a half. Now, there's a bit of stereotypical marsupial sexual size dimorphism thrown in, with females being at about 13.7, males about 19.7 kilo. All in all, that's just a little over half the previous estimated size. So what does this tell us about the thylacine? Looking back at that predator to prey body mass chart, where does the thylacine fit in? Well, it turns out that unlike with the previous estimates, it doesn't fit on the right of that 21 kilo threshold with the wolf, but below that threshold with small prey-focused predators. This strongly suggests a prey preference of animals smaller than half of their own mass. Things like patamelons and bandicoots. It's not so wolf-like after all. There are a ton of institutions and people to thank, since this involved gathering a lot of thylacine specimens from around the world. They were all amazing to work with and visit with. And thank you so much for watching and listening. Cheers.